For family offices, increasing allocations to alternatives also comes with more tedious tasks required to manage portfolios. Are these manual operational workflows slowing you down? This episode of the AYU Family Office podcast is brought to you by Canoe Intelligence. Born within a family office, Canoe uses AI and machine learning to automate manual workflows and transform how you manage your alternative investment data. Automate your document collection and data extraction process to turn tedious tasks into your strategic advantage, delivering precise outcomes and actionable insights to manage your alts smarter with Canoe. Over 200 family offices utilize Canoe to help improve efficiencies, scale their alts, portfolios, and future-proof the family office. Find out how in the podcast description or visit canoeintelligence.com/AYU.
Hello, welcome to the AYU Family Office podcast. It is just me again at this time. So last week we had the Family Office private dining. We got together a group of single family offices and multi-family offices here in London. And it was a great session to just understand, how to increase operational efficiency and, hear from our community. I'd love to introduce our guest this week, Chris Wheatley. He works for a private multifamily office and the focus is on next gen. So this is a super interesting conversation. We haven't touched on this yet in the AU Family Office podcast. Without further ado, you will hear from me and Chris shortly. Right, Chris, it's great to have you on the AU Family Office podcast. Thank you for joining us. It would be great for you to kick off a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to come and chat to you guys today and also explain what we do and how we think about things to your community, which is a fantastic community to be part of. So I run a multifamily office based here in the UK. And we work with a very small, but I suppose interesting group of families who are very private in what they do across their investment portfolios and also helping them look and understand that their wealth and the wealth transfers of what they get up to with their kids.
Amazing. So it'd be great to understand a little bit more about your background and essentially how you got to where you are now.
Yeah. Okay. So, gosh.
Not from birth. Don't worry.
Okay, wait. I was born in London. No. So I started my career 12 years ago when I left university, and I went to an old world UK stockbroker, which was really interesting, but not quite my cup of tea. So I then left to join a really interesting firm, which was looking after high net worth individuals and managing their assets across liquid markets. So that's fixed income, equities, commodities, liquid hedge funds, etc. And then my first foray into the family office world was several years ago when I sort of left there to join a boutique multi-family office, which looked after money on a discretionary basis for clients and an advisory basis. And I was brought in to run the advisory part of what they do. Mm-hmm. Then, having done that for a few years, I decided I could do it better. That's always the case. So I left to set up the business that I now run.
Amazing. And before we jump into more about that business, I think it's always good to add context. So everyone has different definitions of family offices, multifamily offices. What is your definition of a multifamily office? What does that look like for you?
So for us, I give you the really complicated explanation, but in its absolute essence, it's a group of families who don't wish to pay for all the staff that is required to run their investment portfolios, run their households, and run the estates.
Okay, great. And what was the typical, I guess, is there a minimum, is it an AUM? I'm sure you get these sort of questions. Is there, what's the bandwidth for that?
So there's no minimum per se, but obviously, at some point it makes sense to start to do it. And at some point it makes sense to do it all yourself.
Okay.
And with economies of scale. So typically families start to chat to us and find it interesting to chat to us when they've got 50 million of assets, investable assets. And typically once they get through the 500 million mark, they start to consider setting up their own structures and staffing people themselves.
And that's when you'd almost transitioned into a single family office.
Absolutely. Great. That's exactly right.
Nice. The lovely evolution. So tell us a bit about the sort of offering, of what you're offering families right now.
Yeah. So clearly I'm relatively young. I don't know. I've got a few grey hairs here.
I was always trying to figure out your age. I'm like, I can't.
Well, I will tell you, it's 32. So
okay, well,
I'm very candid about it. It's not a thing to be ashamed.
no, it's a strength. It's an asset for sure.
So what I decided to do was to focus the business around people who are relatively similar to me in terms of the age profile. So clearly, I get on very well with people in the early 20s all the way through to probably early 50s. I've always struggled to connect really well with that 80-year-old property billionaire who sort of looks at me in jeans and a t-shirt. I dressed up for you today, so I've got a nice shirt on. Who then sort of doesn't quite understand why they should be listening to advice from a 30-something-year-old. So what we really focus on is helping the next generation of wealthy individuals and families to take ownership, to become empowered, and really help facilitate a successful generation of wealth.
Interesting. And what is, I mean, I guess for us, next gen is pretty implicit. But for those listening, what does next gen mean in the landscape of family offices?
So it's a really good question. And again, you can define it in many different ways. I suppose the easiest one is you will have a primary wealth holder in terms of a generation. Think of grandparents or parents. And then it's the generation beneath them. So the sons, the daughters, the grandchildren who are going to inherit the wealth or have started inheriting the wealth. But there can also be a bit of a mentality thing about it. You often find people who have come from a wealthy but not super wealthy background, who then go and create a lot of wealth themselves. And they're in their, again, 30s and 40s, who don't see themselves as the old 70, 80-year-olds. So they see themselves as part of a next generation of wealth, even though they've generated most of it themselves.
And what is, I guess, for you, you're specifically working with the sort of next gen clients. What are the common themes or needs? Like, why would they come to you specifically?
Sure. So in terms of the common challenges that we see a lot of families facing is, especially if the parents or the first generation of wealth have created the wealth, there's no roadmap, there's no template for them to then say, how do I invest this, but also how do I make sure that my children are ready to inherit it when the time comes? So often they will come to us with that mentality of, hey, I know I have to do something about this. We have seen some people come in and be like, hey, I run it all on an iPhone. And we're like, you can probably do something about that. And often we see people come to us because they are the next gen, because they want someone who understands them and the things that they're going through in life, getting married, buying houses, kids. I mean, school fees are something else right now.
Yeah.
Who go through that journey with them and can sit at the same time of their table, sit at the same side of their table, not just when it comes to interviewing managers and making investments, but also when speaking to the rest of their family about what they want and how they want to do it.
When we're talking about next gen, are we talking about those who maybe have some decision-making power, but don't have essentially the full, like...
I mean, yes and no. I mean,
and that's what I was wondering, because...
So we see some people who are next gen in the sense of they're the next generation to inherit the wealth, but they've got zero information and they've got zero ability to affect a decision within their family structures. We also see people who are going quite far along that process. And what's interesting is you can have a real range. And one small thing, which I'm sure many of your listeners might recognize, is that if you are not just the next gen, but several generations down the line, you've actually made some mistakes and you've got a process in place that can help you. So some people do come to us and say, hey, this is what my family have been doing, but I want to do something slightly different. And then that becomes an interesting conversation as well.
I mean, for sure. I think, what are, I guess, the biggest shifts in how the next gen are thinking about wealth, investing and business, and how that relates to what you just said?
So I suppose that to start, so one thing that always comes across when we're talking about people who've either inherited wealth or just about to, they always say the most consistent thing I ever come across is, I don't want to repeat mistakes. And there's always going to be that, not quite trauma, but there's going to be something in the past which the parents have done that they want to avoid. It could be around the wealth transfer piece. It could be about how they've made investment decisions. It could be about how they communicate that to the whole family. So I think that the moment the next gen that we're really speaking to are really thinking about, how do I structure these assets? How do I learn from other people? Is there a community that I can join? Is there lessons that can be learned so as to not to repeat those mistakes?
For sure. And I think there must be, I mean, that is, must be underpinned by values. What are the values that you are seeing with, next gen? I mean, we hear a lot about sustainability, entrepreneurship, impact. What are you seeing from where you're sitting?
Yeah, it's one of those ones where I could be a little bit contentious and say that things such as sustainability aren't necessarily the things that the next gen focus on. And whilst there is always going to be something that you are really passionate about, I would say that the most common things are, hey, this is what I really, really care about, and this is what I really want to do. And that could be something as obscure as buying classic cars and developing a business out of artwork or whatever it might be. Or it can be as, I suppose, traditional as now the concept is of going down the value aligned. I want to be a sustainable investor and I want to make sure that all my investments are going to offset carbon, etc.
Interesting. And how do you think, in terms of, we talk about sort of, passion projects, and, that's been very, very historic with a lot of the sort of older matriarch family offices that have existed. How do we see that with the next gen? Is there still that desire for the art, the luxury cars, you name it?
I say it's very, it's easy to see and easy now to do is to take that a step further. So rather than just buying them and putting a bag wearing it around your wrist, or going to Hermes, and I don't know if we can mention names here, but going and buying an Hermes bag and putting it in your cupboard. The ability now to create a company specifically or a fund specifically to go and buy luxury items or to buy cars, redo them up, and then turn a profit as a GP is really interesting. So a GP is a general partner. So the fund manager themselves. So if you see the next gen, come up with this great concept, who can see that their friends are doing these things and they can see where the market is taking certain asset classes in ways their parents might not. They can then create a fund structure or company structure in order to take advantage of it and create wealth for themselves that way.
So essentially what you're saying is that you're seeing, when we're talking about alternative assets as an investment, right? Typically we look at that as VC, PE, hedge funds. There's almost like an evolution of that now, where there's these asset classes which are, they've always existed, but in terms of like watches, bags, cars as a commodity, and people are creating essentially investment vehicles to play in order to take advantage of price appreciation in those luxury goods. And you were seeing a lot of it from countries such as India, North Africa, for example, where there's a view that these previously Western goods, luxury handbags, are a great store of value compared to markets. And especially if you look at what's been going on over the past quarter, you can see they oscillate around quite a lot. I definitely wish I bought another bag rather than put more money in the S&P 100, that's for sure.
Yeah, I get that.
No, super interesting. And in terms of, I guess, your outlook, just talking from a global macro perspective, what are the types of families that you're dealing with? Where do they sit globally, and what's their sort of geopolitical?
Really good question. So I'd say that if I was setting up this business 30 years ago, it would be effectively European and it would be US. Now, the greatest number of families that we're seeing doing really interesting things, especially within the next gen space, come from Africa, come from Southeast Asia. And it's not just they've got a lot of wealth. It's just that those families in particular have been quite specific about, hey, we can see this issue. Almost we can see the West have done this.
Yes.
And made the mistake. So let's get ahead of the curve. Let's try and talk more about education, understand our wealth, and then transfer it in better ways than we've seen elsewhere.
What sort of, I guess, philosophy and principles do you find that differ between those families in those regions compared to, let's say, the West?
Yes. So the major one that we see is a almost deference. So a willingness not to impose yourself onto a conversation, onto a decision-making process, because there is that almost a patriarchal view in many countries, West and around the world. And also a lack of empowerment, where you feel as though even if you wanted to, you can't.
Yes.
So what we try and do is break down those barriers and ensure that those people who want to have a voice get to have a voice. And it's very it's very difficult. It can be when you're sitting down explaining something to what would be a phenomenal parent and saying, actually, it's not quite right. You might want to try doing something else. And then the other flip side of that is where there's been a sudden wealth transfer, either one parent or both parents have died, or someone's been given a large amount of money as part of a trust, for example, then there's a temptation to run before you walk.
Yeah.
So it's very easy now to get a lot of information, which is phenomenal. But you also sometimes feel as though, as like, Jen, I've got this, I can go to it.
Yes.
And part of our job is to put those guardrails up, put a sort of firewall around people and say, actually, let's think about this in a different way. And when we do that, often that leads to better outcomes in general.
Yeah, I can imagine. And in regards to, you mentioned, trusts, and I'm interested and I'm sure our listeners are, in the concept of transfer of wealth, because that's a big thing that people talk about. But in a practical sense, what does that actually look like? Is that, changing names on paperwork, companies? Like, what is transfer of wealth? Like, what does that actually mean, and what does it look like?
So the really reductive first principles is, I'm a parent, I've got X million, and I'm going to hand it to you. There you go. You've got the wealth. And
thank you.
That'd be phenomenal. Mom, Dad, if you're listening, watching, please. Yeah. So often it comes about in two ways. One is death, unfortunately. It all happens to us all. And at that point, the legal system kicks in. If you have a will, if you don't have a will, there's processes around that wealth leaving one bank account and going into another. There's also gifts. So a lot of the time, people will gift money to the next generation, and that can be through a number of mechanisms. We've touched on trusts.
Yes.
It can also be through giving them shares in a sort of family company, which either makes things like goods and services, or it's a holding company for the wealth to be generated and stored in. So that typically is what we call the transfer of wealth. Now, how it actually happens, it's based on the legal system. In the UK and Western Europe and the US, it's sort of one way, and it changes with different regions that you're part of. Does that?
No. That definitely does answer the question. I think a lot of family offices are looking for, during this process of transfer of wealth, tax efficiency, right?
Yeah.
Because what we find a lot of the time is when you're transferring wealth, especially if you're in places like the UK, where there's very, high inheritance tax and stuff like that.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, there you go. How do families go about doing that? Are they, I know they're sophisticated, I know they're smart. What are the ways that you see it? Is this, yeah.
So depending upon the jurisdiction that they're in, there will be different ways to mitigate tax. In the UK, we do see lots of people go down a route of speaking to lawyers and accountants to help them figure out the best way of doing it. We see people who will move countries, for example. There's a lot of people at the moment who are going to Dubai. Obviously, we're going to other places around the world.
Miami, Switzerland,
No, I'm sure there's going to be a podcast on this. If not, there already has been.
Yes.
So
should be.
So watch closely, Baz. Yeah. So that's typically the first thing that you would go to. We're not tax advisors, we're not lawyers, but we work very closely with those other advisors that fit into the family structure. And most of the time, it's really important to just have these conversations up front. There's been too many times where we've worked with a family where the principal, whether the owner of the assets has died in unfortunate circumstances. Not that they've been murdered. They're just
dun dun dun.
Health issues.
It's going to be a true crime series.
I know. Gosh, you could take it in many different ways, but primarily because they've died and they've not sort of informed either their spouse or the next gen about where the assets are, which leads to actually several years and often lots of legal costs in discovering where they are and making sure that those are now rehomed in the right place.
So you said you're not, and thank you for all of that, because that's actually super useful, because I'm not, in terms of actually how it looks, the practical sense, I'm not delved into it. Like I say, I don't do any of the sort of taxation side of things or any of the lawyer stuff, which is very necessary.
I think that's a really good, I would avoid it. But.
So you said you're not advising on tax.
Yes.
What are you advising on then? I know you touched on this in the beginning, but what is your sort of like, few pillars and your main things of like, if I was a next gen family office, why am I coming to you?
So the root cause of it is you want your money to be looked after and you're not quite sure how to do it. So that is to make investments, to look at how you make those decisions, which is often more important than just making an investment decision. So we will help you put together your asset allocation, help you think about which investments are the right ones to choose, make sure that if you are presented with an investment opportunity from either your best friend or your, banker at a different bank, that you're doing the right due diligence to make sure it is going to be a good investment.
So do you go about sourcing deals given their remits? You have their investment remit, you go sourcing deals, and then they will come to you, giving you opportunities that they think are relevant. And you'll basically essentially go, yeah, this is great, or no, stay away.
Yeah, pretty much something like that. And I think you hit the nail right on the head when you say families will bring ideas to us. And one of my completely things that I want to underpin the business by and the way that we engage with families by is that if a family's made a lot of money in a particular industry, let's say biotech, they will always see the best biotech deals that are gathered because people want them to be on their share cap table. If you made your money in property, you're not going to see those same deals.
No.
So my view is to partner with amazing communities like you guys.
I
know.
Shout out.
And make sure that in the communities that we're building, that we're part of, and especially within our client base, that those families that are seeing these interesting things because they're known for being investors in that space are able to share them with other families. And ultimately, though, we are responsible for doing due diligence and making sure that it's a thumbs up, not a thumbs down.
Yes, nice. And do you pool the capital? Is it is it a literal and multi-family office structure in that sense? Are you pooling the capital?
So we don't hold any client money. But what we would do is work with a lawyer or someone who is more heavily involved in the structuring of a company or an SPV, which is a special purpose vehicle.
Nice. You know that. Thank you.
Which then becomes the vehicle for families to make those investments. Some families don't want to do that and they want to appear on the share cap table themselves because there's certain advantages that you would get, but it depends how much money you're investing.
So essentially, some of the families that you work with, maybe two of them might go, we'll pull some money into this SPV, interested in the opportunity, or you might just find one family go, actually, no, we want to go straight to this company and put our money in now.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes companies or funds want investors to come in different ways. So sometimes they prefer the SPV route because it's sort of 5 or 6 people in one line item.
Yeah.
Or they want other people to come on an individual basis because it can be, if you are a biotech company and you've got this amazing family who invest in biotech before, it's useful to have them on your share cap table too.
Yeah. I mean, I was literally speaking in the last podcast last week and it was all about, co-investments and all that, and having families that have their niche and their speciality, and then other families wanting to, come in on those deals because they value their expertise and opinions. I think that's...
I think it's a really good way of putting it. And another great way, I have to give him a hat tip for this, but my previous boss, one of the sort of best things that he'd say to families and help really put this into perspective is to take risk where you know. So if you made your money in recruitment, then when it comes to all things recruitment, you do that. But everything else, let us make sure that it's going to stand.
Yes. No, great. So how do you navigate generational differences, when it comes to views on money, businesses, or, investment diversification? I'm sure you have new people coming up and they're like...
So this is the hardest part of my job because in a way we're trying not to parent.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might come across that way, but taking those 3 things, so money, business and investment, the money part is... I think very personal. People have very different relationships with money. And I think if you're we often speak to the principal wealth holder and say, if you're going to give this money away rather than do it on your deathbed, you have to accept that when you transfer that wealth to the daughter, to the son, that they're going to spend it in some way. And you need to be okay with that.
Yes.
And you have to make sure when you speak to them, you're communicating this is without reservation. Like go and buy the Ferrari or go and put it all into a savings account. Whatever you might want to do, make sure that the giving generation are okay with it. In terms of the business aspect, if you're a a family that has a long history of being in a particular business, you seventh, eighth, whatever generation, then you've probably worked through how the different ideas of different family members across different generations, etc., how to incorporate those because you're a successful business.
Yeah.
For those families that are only on the first or second or third generation, then we often encourage them to let the next generation make a mistake. So you've got two different ideas. Let's I suppose, case study this.
Yes.
You've got the daughter who says we should be making this business decision, and the grandfather, both on the board, says no, we shouldn't be doing this. You can find ways of giving agency to the granddaughter to go and test or run a department or a different business where whatever the structure might be, that she gets the agency to take that decision. And if it fails, then that's okay. You can use that as a teachable moment. If it succeeds, then that's phenomenal. And you as the principal wealth holder then learn, okay, well, maybe there's some value to this. And very similar on the investment side, but it's not quite the same. A business could be very personal, and that's a little bit less.
Yes.
Most people typically think that when it comes to a multi-generational difference on investments, and the conflict around it, is that it's all to do with value investing or sustainability or something like that. But actually, no, most of the time it's just we should be more in equities or be less in gold or whatever it might be. It's an asset class and an investment decision. Often, in fact, the most common one is someone, let's say the daughter or the son of a family who says, hey, Joe or Stephanie has shown me this amazing investment deal, let's do it. And then you have the old generation that actually, no, I can see some issues with this. Now, what we try and say is let people make mistakes, but sizing is really important. So you might say to them, sure, okay, you can do this, but maybe it's 100 grand, not $1 million.
Yeah.
And that way, and make sure there's a plan to help resolve the sort of dichotomy of opinion. And over time, give that person more agency, give them more empowerment to make decisions. And at that point, you get more cohesion together.
I love it. I mean, it's a great, I think the way you just, articulated that is, that's why you work with these next gen and the generations that you do, because it sounds like, it's that level-headed approach of you've got to understand from the next generations, they want to, have some of the reins, and the older matriarchs, patriarchs can find that difficult to let go and trust those younger generations.
It's a great point. Trust underpins it all. And at the very start, it's a big journey. And I remember my first job at the buddy stockbroker, someone said to me, it's a journey, and it's a journey of trust. And at the start, a client won't trust you, but at the end of it, they do. And often you get the same relationship and the same trust relationship between a parent and a son, daughter. And that's, again, case studied out. You've seen them make mistakes when it comes to their friends, where the decisions they want to make, where they decide to drive too fast or whatever it might be. And that trust is like, oh, it's my baby, it's my child. Of course, I know more than them. And the more that you give them, the greater extent you allow them to make a decision, it's the more chances of them to show you that actually, they've grown up, they understand, they're wise, they've learned. And when there is a failing, don't treat it as, oh, you shouldn't have done this, but hey, let's hash this out. And often people will now come to us and say, look, to help us go on this journey of trust, Chris, could you sit down and put those guardrails up to help Samantha or Jerry or whoever it is achieve that aim, but make sure it doesn't go too AWOL.
Yes. So on that, again, no names, but or just keep it general theme, what are the main frustrations maybe you see from the older generation? What do they get frustrated with?
Oh, you didn't listen to me. Literally, that's, I told you. I told you so. I told you so. And at that point, it's because typically we've all been young. We're still young.
Yes, we are. Hopefully.
So you make a lot of mistakes when you're young. Yeah. And you grow up and you learn from those mistakes. You never, ever learn from someone else's mistake.
No.
So even if you are a really successful entrepreneur, you've created your wealth, you're looking at your granddaughter and she's saying, let's do this. And you know in your heart of hearts that that's not a good idea. You kind of just have to say, sure, I think these are the risks, and just let it happen. To then turn around and say, I had told you so, actually is really unhealthy. People, when they're young and they make mistakes, need to be told it's okay. And that's why sizing is important.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So we've kind of touched on this, and I'd be interested to know more about, you've given me some examples here, but what strategies do you find the most effective in educating or onboarding next-gen clients into the family's financial decision-making?
Yeah, it's the $1 million question, I suppose. So the one thing I'd come back to is plan. So putting a plan in place, which doesn't just span years, but it goes on to maybe decades, depending on how young the next gen are and the point at which you're thinking about this, is set steps and set thresholds at which they get a greater responsibility in what the family are discussing and what the family are going to do. So starting off, a thing that we would often do is, as someone who's 18, 19, maybe they're 20, they're just perhaps finishing university, and they're always going to be really eager and they want to make decisions and they want to at least get involved. So you would sit down, we sit down with the family and we encourage them to say, right, this is a plan we're going to make for the next 10 years. And the access that you get and the things you get to have an opinion on change as you take things off. So finish university. Cool. Great. Go work for a company.
Yes.
Take exams. Spend lots of time. Get a mentor. Spend time with other people within industry. And then once they sort of do that, you then come on to what I was saying earlier about sizing. So you might say, hey, here's a small portfolio for you to start to manage. And they then get access to a different level of discussion or whatever it might be. How it is so, as we keep on saying, I mean, it's so different. It's hard to be able to sit down and use one example. But what underpins this whole thing is a wonderful psychological factor. I'm sure you know this, but when you're standing on the tube or you're about to get on and you see the screen and the board and it says 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minutes, as humans, we really want to have certainty. Yeah. Uncertainty is the thing that hurts us the most. So imagine that you are there, you're about to get on the tube, and you're not told any information at all. This just says no smoking. You hate it. So your kids are going to be the same. If you're a wealthy family, they're going to want to know at what point they get access to company board minutes or sitting at the investment committee meeting or making a decision. So if you can plan this out for them, they actually feel a lot better.
Yes, I think it's interesting as well, even in talking about that, because, in conventional job roles, that's, you have those sort of milestones, you have those expectations, and it's funny because family offices could be set up as corporations in the sense of what they're doing, but obviously they are, they're family offices, they're very different. However, like you say, as humans, we need to have that sort of sense of purpose and fulfillment. And
this is a great word. You absolutely hit it nail on the head. And part of the planning is, how do you give people purpose?
Yes.
And another trick, whilst we're sort of talking about this, is to have an open conversation when someone is in their late teens or they're finishing university and say, what do you want from life? Like that is the question at the end of the day is, do you want to be involved in the family's operational business? Do you want to be involved in the holding business for the investment side of
Yes, yeah.
Or do you want to just spend your time as a ex-unemployed artist, make it up?
Yes.
And in which case, once you understand that, you can all become a lot more fulfilled. And perhaps if you're the unemployed artist, you get the minutes and that's all you're happy with. But if you're striving to become, the next Warren Buffett,
yes,
then you probably want a bit more say.
I mean, you touched on it just a second ago, but open communication. How do you find, how important is that? And how do you find families typically communicate with each other? Because when I think of these big families, I'm thinking all over the world. And, you have these families that come together and they almost have summits. And, talk to me a little bit more about that aspect.
So communication is normally really good or really bad.
Yeah. Okay.
Honestly. And
full spectrum.
But full spectrum. And you almost end up sort of wanting to say, I'm not a therapist. But the families that are really good at communication have often learned from mistakes, going back to what we spoke about at the beginning of this episode. And what we can try and do is help explain to families that if they go about doing what they're doing now, that they're likely to fall into these mistakes. Obviously, we can't force them to change tact. The really good communication within family, often they've understood what is the main objective. Everyone is on one page. We understand where we're going with this. We understand what's happening. You understand who's responsible for doing what. You understand who the people are involved within decision makings, and you understand the path for everyone to be included or not. Because sometimes it's not right to include everyone. If you're a massive family, you don't want everyone making decisions. So on that communicative base, obviously now we've got WhatsApp, we've got instant messaging, it's all amazing, it's great.
Yeah.
So you can do things off WhatsApp, or you can send out big board packs and things like that. It really depends to the way the families work. And often the big trick now, or the tricky thing now, is if you've got a wealthy family, they're typically very international.
Yes.
And especially at the next gen level, lots of people we know will, or I know, end up living in San Francisco for a little bit, going to study in China or whatever it might be.
Yes.
So you have this broad family based around the world. And how do you get onto the same time zones? How do you engage each other in the exact way that it should be done? It's a big trick.
I mean, it's definitely a challenge. I mean, even just in, when I'm scheduling meetings with people all around the world, it's like we all face those challenges. When you've got those larger families and decision makers, I mean, probably is similar to a lot of companies and a lot of firms, issues they go through. But it's funny when it's your own family, right?
It is, because you go through this sort of, hey, you're my mum, you're my dad. And when you're a kid, you don't really care about money. Things like that. It's just, do they love me? Yes.
Yeah.
And then slowly over time, it starts to become, it becomes a corporation. And you either get involved or you don't. But making sure that you've got that professional bit as well as the personal bit's really important. We've seen from great shows like Succession how it can bleed between the lines.
Yes, literally. The whole next gen thing reminds me of Succession. If I'm thinking we should have that as the backdrop theme tune for this episode.
I really get that.
So let's talk about emerging trends in the next gen space. What are you seeing? I mean, we touched on things before about, buzzwords like sustainability, and we've touched on things like investing in luxury watches, bags. What else are you seeing? What are the sort of things that you're seeing in that space?
So in terms of asset classes, there's, I suppose what's funny now is that 25 years ago, hedge funds were all the rage. And actually they're starting to come back into fashion with this gen.
Yeah.
They understand it. They could see the emergence of what are called pod shops, which I'm sure I'll leave for a later episode about hedge funds.
Please.
But the way that they're engaging with an old asset class is quite neat. The other things or the assets that people are looking at investing into are private credits. A lot of time is spent on venture capital. It is really the buzzword at the moment.
Yes.
And then private equity too. So this big focus on these relatively new asset classes compared to gold, public equity, public fixed income takes up a lot of the discussion space that we've got. The other things that people are trying to focus on are typically generational wealth building. And from a business sense, that might mean taking your family, which had a very regional, not sort of parochial nature, but was confined to Europe, and trying to make it more international because you've got that international background.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to build on the legacy that your parents have given you or your grandparents have given you. Or in some cases, wealthy families marry, and they then combine two businesses. But it could be different fields.
Super families.
Super family, exactly. And you see that quite a lot now. And so that then becomes the discussion of how do we create the next tranche of wealth for our family.
And I guess how do you align from the investment thesis perspective and all of that comes with it?
I would say that it gets very tricky when you've got two very loud voices, especially as it often happens to very patriarchal families.
It's like having one baby or twins.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how for your multifamily office, how are, your services evolving to remain relevant to the needs of these families?
Yeah, I love this question. First thing is communication. How do we actually speak to people? How do we explain things? And I love this example. I was sat in a pair of jeans, t-shirt, sort of absolutely horrific trainers with lots of holes in them. Sat on the sofa.
You're wearing them now, guys. I know I might not be able to sit in.
Lies this.
He's doing Jake.
So I was sat on the sofa with a young next gen who's in his early 20s, and we were talking about investing, and we happened to be playing FIFA at the same time. So talking about it and then trying to explain how investing works, but using manager mode, which is, for those of you who may or may not know, it's a way to play FIFA which involves essentially buying players when they're young and they're cheap, and then they grow them into being superstars. So talking about that, and it was like, okay, I kind of get this now. And those sorts of ways of speaking to people are much, I suppose, more personal than it once was, which was, hey, we're going to go out to a restaurant and I'm going to tell you about what I know a PE ratio is, and people don't really care.
They switch off, yeah.
They switch off. And it's the other thing that we're trying to do is find communities where next gen can meet other next gen members.
Yes.
Which is, I think, really, back in the day, it used to be chatting around a golf club, or going around a golf course instead of swinging and missing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now it's much more about, let's go for a quiet drink, tea or coffee, doesn't have to be alcoholic. Let's talk about our shared experiences, things that have gone wrong and have gone right for our families, and how we can learn from it. So trying to facilitate those discussions is quite a big part of what we do at the moment.
Amazing. I mean, it sounds like you're doing some super interesting stuff. I mean, we speak to a lot of, family offices, and we've spoke to one or two other multifamily offices, but we've not touched on this next gen topic, which I think, if we're looking at the data, and just also, there's a big transfer of wealth that's happening right now.
It's a huge transfer of wealth, and not just because everyone's starting, but because people are starting to think about it proactively and giving it away. And I also think something that's really important that we've not quite touched on is the split of wealth that's going to women.
Yeah.
So the biggest trend I think that we're seeing at the moment, actually specifically within Asia at the moment, is the amount of wealth that is going to women as opposed to men. And the way women invest is different and often far better than men. So we at the family office, multifamily office, are very conscious of that. And we're very conscious of having women involved in the investment making decisions of the business and the families, and ensuring that the female next gen that we work with have a female role model or a female mentor that can help speak to them in language that they want to hear it and engage in. I mean, we sometimes are not the best at engaging like that.
I guess I would love to know, is that because now, before historically, transfer of wealth would only be able for, would be only given to the son, and now because of how the world's evolving, women are now being, if there's no other son, they get that legacy of wealth. What's the change there?
I also think the way that families have thought about who is good at making decisions, and it's no longer just, I'm going to give it to my son because he is my son. I will give it to my children, but my daughter is a far better operator than my son is. So she is going to go and take the reins and go and run the business. And there's less of a stigma about it. I know in some parts of the world there is, and actually what we try and help with is find safe spaces for people to talk about those issues.
Yeah, well, I think that's amazing. And it's actually a great point that you touched on, because I hadn't even considered that element to it, but it's definitely something that's topical and exciting for sure.
Yeah, it is. I can't wait for everyone to make far better investment decisions.
Yes, I know. And make some more money. That's the bottom line, right? And so before we wrap up here, I guess my final question to you would be, what's the advice you'd give to a family office, or, looking to better engage with their next gen, or just the next gen in general? What's your kind of takeaway? This is what I leave on the table.
Yeah, so leave this all on the table. The last thing I'd say is that if you're a family going through this process, the thing that next gens most want is A, to be heard, and B, to be empowered. That is really where the issues come down to. So create a plan for how to involve them into the decision-making process, and make sure that when you do that, sizing is the key thing. Give them a little bit of risk at a time and help them grow in confidence, rather than just shout it down if it doesn't work first time.
Amazing. Look, it's been a wonderful speaking to you today, Chris. We'll have to get you back on the podcast for sure. And obviously further involved in the AU community and all of that good stuff. But yeah, I think that's it from today. Thank you everyone for listening, and thank you to Chris Wheatley.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers. So it was absolutely amazing getting to speak to Chris Wheatley today. I think most of you can agree that, the next gen is a big topic in the family office space that a lot of people haven't really covered. And I think, understanding how best to communicate and understand the wants and needs of both the patriarch and matriarch, but also the new players that are inevitably going to come in is essential. And as Chris put it, giving them agency and fulfillment is a big part of how to hopefully allow this transfer of wealth to be as seamless as possible, although I understand it's a little bit more complicated than that. And looking forward as well, we are also launching our health series with V Health, where we're going to be doing a lot of stuff centered around mindfulness, mental resilience, and also ways that we can, physically charge and recharge our bodies. As we know in this space, a lot of people, go for lunches and drinks and dinners, but it's also important for us to make sure that we're looking after our minds and bodies as well. So thank you so much for listening to the podcast today, and I'll see you guys next week, hopefully with Gus.
For family offices, increasing allocations to alternatives also comes with more tedious tasks required to manage portfolios. Are these manual operational workflows slowing you down? This episode of the AYU Family Office podcast is brought to you by Canoe Intelligence. Born within a family office, Canoe uses AI and machine learning to automate manual workflows and transform how you manage your alternative investment data. Automate your document collection and data extraction process to turn tedious tasks into your strategic advantage, delivering precise outcomes and actionable insights to manage your alts smarter with Canoe. Over 200 family offices utilize Canoe to help improve efficiencies, scale their alts, portfolios, and future-proof the family office. Find out how in the podcast description or visit canoeintelligence.com/AYU.